With everything you just said. Right. Attention.
Welcome back to House Education on March 11th. It was a brief period for committee discussion before we head to the floor. Talking a bit more about moving forward with Act 73. And I think I'm just going to ask the committee to kind of reflect on sort of what we have sort of heard up until we had our break, events over the town meeting break, most specifically school budget votes, and kind of how you see that and interpret that. And then how that may or may not have changed your thinking moving forward, including things that we've heard in the last 2 days here as well. Beth, do you feel like starting us off?
I'll speak to the school budget piece, I guess. It does not impact me or my thinking. And I would note from what I saw, whether budgets failed or passed, in both cases, the vote was very close in almost every case, one way or the other. So I think there's still, I see a very large split in this state on people's thinking around school budgets still.
What happened in your area?
It failed.
And at what district?
Kingdom East.
Kingdom East.
Did not fail by much. But I saw that with budgets that passed as well as budgets that failed, that it wasn't. And as usual, a very, very, very small percentage of the voters voted.
Yeah.
There are 3,000 names on the checklist in Linden, and I think 500 votes were cast. That's just for one town. I think that's pretty much statewide.
Yeah.
A quarter of the voters even vote on the budget, if that. So it's hard to put a whole lot of stock in what the vote is telling you.
Pretty much the same in my district. 2 schools did not, 2 did. The one in Milton failed, but it was very close. I think it was like 28 or 30 votes.
Maybe like 26.
Wow.
And the one in Alberg, I don't know the exact numbers. It was fairly close, but it failed. The other 2 schools passed. I think the ones that passed were a little greater. So 2 and 2.
Yeah. The other 2 would be South Hero.
South Hero and Grand Isle School.
These are K-8 schools.
One of them 6, and then 7th and 8th grade going.
So does any of that, you had kind of had a split decision up there. Does it, Beth sort of said, doesn't really change her thinking on anything or what we've heard to date either?
Not in her respect.
Yeah. Rob, looks like the circle's going around your direction.
Let's see, I think budget passed in town, talked to a lot of people there. It's just kind of interesting hearing you too. After the governor came out, sort of called all hands on deck to vote down budgets, and kind of didn't really happen. I mean, am I wrong in just assuming that, it's kind of hoping to keep the whole tax rebellion going, for purposes of our education transformation?
I'm not going to interpret the motivations of the governor, but I think your observation is one worth pointing out.
Yeah, so it seems like, the people who are voting well, at least in most of the state, supporting their local education, which is good.
And does it make you sort of rethink? Well, we'll just keep going around here.
So our budget passed, which was good news. I mean, I think we're lucky. Historically, my district has not struggled to pass a budget. Yeah, I mean, I guess just in terms of what we've heard since coming back, I mean, I thought Chelsea's testimony yesterday from the VSA was really helpful in sort of directing our thinking going forward. I think like many of us, I do get some questions from my community around education transformation that showed Vermonters are maybe not following along with the twists and turns of this conversation. I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of concern, but I think the fact that so many budgets passed across the state shows that people care about public education. So I think it's a positive sign, despite the fact that problems persist.
Our budget passed about 2-1 margin. My thinking has not changed a lot. I know we have underlying structural issues. And before Chelsea used sledgehammer, my pre-session article was, let's use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And I think the things that Chelsea reminded us yesterday, many of these are not new. Some of these are not even just from the session. I think we need to be taking some more strategic steps before in a reasonable timeline. I just think so, regardless of even my opinions on Act 73, the scope of change and work contemplated is pretty unrealistic. And so I'd rather make incremental change and improvement towards those goals. We definitely have some underlying structural issues, but I'm not sure that we're ready to fully take on some of those underlying structural issues.
Split decision in my area as well. I represent part of Otter Valley. Their budget was voted down, and I represent a fair bit of Addison Central, and that always passes at least 2-1. I kind of had the same observation as Rob. So like, despite the most popular governor in the country sort of trying to keep the tax revolt going, voters kind of said something different. How to interpret that? I've been thinking about it a lot. Is that a vote for the status quo? Probably for some areas, yeah. I'd say certainly for places where budgets passed easily, it is. I'm sort of stuck. I represent Salisbury, which is in that central district, and I represent Leicester, which is in Otter Valley. Kids can live half mile apart and have completely different experiences because of the way we fund schools. So I sort of have that as a shining star. The big aspiration is to try to do something about that inequity. I would steal Representative Brady's word. I am somewhat overwhelmed by, and not that I didn't know that it wasn't there and that I knew that I would feel this eventually. But the amount of sort of decision-making and work that has to be done. And while there's a timeline laid out, it's an aspirational timeline. However, in the meantime, I do think I'm a bit of an incrementalist, and, frankly, we can't get this group of people to agree on something. There are probably on big things like where we draw district lines and how districts operate within those lines. We have been given a fairly good roadmap to incremental change that I think we need to take very seriously. Well, it goes back to the redistricting task force, which sort of is at one level of vetting. We've had sort of what we just heard yesterday as well. As I think about the things that we can rally around here, I think about newer and fewer when it comes to secondary education. And I think of CSAs, and I think we've sort of fall apart on the bigger structural change. And I'd hate to lose the other two because we can't get the other one. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I do change from day to day.
If I could add what you're saying, all the emails that I receive, and we all receive a lot of them, I think they're pretty much mirroring what you're saying. I mean, everybody out there kind of feels the same way.
Yeah. I mean, if you're on the Otter Valley side of things, you might not feel that way. If you're on the Barry side of things, you might not feel that way. And, I find myself like, well, it's also about property taxes. So I do find myself vacillating wildly. Just why I think about things that we can all rally behind that are inexpensive to implement with high probability of payoff while we work towards bigger structural change.
Like Brett Morgan had said, Milton budget, was defeated narrowly. The Georgia budget was another district that I represent, that was defeated also.
So it's you are the
So,
about.
yeah, so my opinion on moving forward hasn't swayed one bit. You know, I realize the governor went out and said people vote their budgets down, but on the other hand, he's telling people he's gonna give them $100-something million to buy down their property taxes. And so we're getting a little bit of conflicting information there, so I don't know how much that affected people's voting. In our district, in the Milton itself, we have about 8,500 voters. We had a larger than normal turnout with about 2,500 voters. Usually it's only about 1,800, so we had really great turnout. But it was still defeated by 26 votes. I'm ready to move forward with Act 73. I think we need to get some courage back and start making some hard decisions and moving things forward. And we have a very short amount of time to do that. So I just want to remind the administration, the governor has said he is not signing a budget unless he's getting the kind of transformation that he has envisioned.
For me,
Basically the way I take it.
sorry. I thought it was my turn. For me, my views haven't changed much, if at all, in this time. I'll echo everything Chris said, except for the budget part. I have two districts that I represent. One passed, although I think only 178 people voted in that one, or at least for one of my towns. For the district I live in, it was our budget was voted down. 593 were yes, 943 no's. So it was a significant vote down, which is been par for course for the last 3 years or more.
By that margin?
By a decent margin, right? It's always enough for you. Cringe. Usually it's in less than 200, but this time it was a fairly large. It was at 350 vote difference. And prior to town meeting day, we had a bunch of budget forums, and my superintendent did a pretty good job about trying to explain how Vermont funds education, kind of see, because everyone's like, you got to cut the budget, but then how much does that save you in tax rate for your town? Depends on a bunch of other factors. And it became more and more clear that as a state, we need to restructure how we do education funding, which is foundation funding, whatever it might be. In my area, that's really what I'm starting to see, is that there's the attachment of understanding that the way we fund education versus the town budget are two very different things, right? We could cut $5 million, but that could create a big savings, or it might be nothing. So I kind of starting to lean into how do we make that change, whether it's structurally or even just as basic as a new funding model. So that's going to run out.
I find myself thinking I agree with talking points from both Rep. Conlon and Rep. Taylor, which is weird. But that's kind of where I'm at. Our budget in Montpelier passed easily, as it usually does. Our budget in Washington Central Unified Union, where I teach, passed as it usually does. And our neighbor, Barry, put forward a level funded budget, and theirs failed, as it usually does.
Level
And level funded.
Or level program.
Same, just keeping the lights on, keeping things where it is. And so they'll continue to cut programs while we continue to maneuver things around so that we can offer our kids more in Montpelier and U32. So much like the Otter Valley very situation that Rep. Conlon was talking about. I too am ready to move forward. I was kind of with Rep. Taylor right until the end, blah, blah, blah.
I lost
blah,
it.
blah, blah. Yeah.
I lost it.
Yeah, the last little bit. I'm less concerned about. But I do think we should move forward with Act 73. I think I wasn't on board. I didn't vote for it originally, but I cannot watch our neighbors continue to cut programs for schools and kids and students and families while I see us continue to flourish just across the line. So that's where I'm at.
What makes that magic and how can that be replicated across the state? What makes yours so uniquely, and how can that translate to the rest of it?
How is it that we continue to pass our budgets and move forward?
Yeah. What makes that work so well for you?
Versus Barry.
Then down the road.
Versus anyone else who just flounders and fails.
I'll speak to our district. It's socioeconomic differences. Pure and simple.
I would say similar.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm interrupting the order, but that raises a really interesting question, like if we fix the property tax credit system, or if we get rid of the cliffs, like what impact would that have on voter behavior around school budgets?
I don't know. I'd say it's interesting. There are other areas around the state that I've seen where voting down the budget is almost more cultural than it is
Passage.
about property taxes.
Yeah.
But
Can I add on to what you just said about socioeconomic?
Yeah.
Because I think, again, obsessed with carrying around like actual FY 26 numbers, but like the difference between what Otter Valley spends and Addison Central before weights, so the actual money difference is only about $700 per kid. Now, our weights, which are about tax capacity, not about funding, which is a real challenge, make those a bigger differential. And I could go through lots of different comparisons. And so I guess, or like I keep, we talk a lot about Slate Valley. They spend in real dollars, not the weighted amount, 22,000 per kid. That's more than both our districts. I'm saying all of this because the socioeconomic status of our kids and poverty and income inequality are such horrific entrenched drivers of things in society. And we should do everything we can, but schools and schools funding alone are probably not going to fix that, even though that's why I became a teacher.
Can I just, yes, I do agree about the socioeconomic, but that's not always necessarily the case. In putting together our budget this year for Milton and looking at some ballot items, what we're doing, we started doing some digging into, the household income in Milton, and the median household income in Milton is actually higher than average for the Chittenden County area and in the state itself. And we are historically a district that is a no vote on the school budget.
Actually, you're the exception.
Historically. That's good.
it's usually multiple
Yes,
votes
yeah.
to get a budget passed.
So, I mean, it's.
I thought it was gonna be second. And
Look at that.
So as far as budgets in my area, only one of my 3 towns has voted. Yes, and the others are yet to come. But the one town that did vote overwhelmingly, yes, also voted to close their school. And they supported their school budget that was proposed. And my region, I think most of the budgets in Windham County that were up, and some are not yet, did pass. So there wasn't much failure of votes in Windham County. I would just say as an aside, we all agree that we can't interpret the governor's impact on the votes, but I think it's also possible that they did have an impact, and some of the no votes or turnout might have had that, you know, that, and he might have contributed to some of that too. I'm not saying he did, I'm saying that you could look at it both ways. So not much of my perspective has changed, but I guess I would say I grow increasingly concerned about the capacity of our system, our schools and our system in general, as well as the AOE to tackle what Act 73 is asking us to do on the timeline that it's at today, the timeline we looked at. And so in some ways I feel more concerned. I also grow more concerned about the foundation formula and its impact. And the things that I can't know and explain to the folks I represent, and how it's going to impact them. I am also I'm a long-term thinker. I like to have a vision of what we're trying to accomplish, and I have one, you know, but I'm not sure my vision is what everyone is agrees with. And my vision includes the things that I've been advocating for in this room, which is regional, middle, and high schools across the state, where the conversations we've had in the last couple of days about CTE make me grow increasingly concerned that we're going to move forward with a system that doesn't take into account doesn't take into account the vision that I think that we have articulated in this room, not just me, but others, about access to CTE programming across the state. I didn't hear a lot of, I wasn't feeling very confident about what we heard in the testimony this morning from in the Commerce Committee. So those things continue to concern me, and because of the capacity issue and because of the feedback from my constituents and across the state, I still think that there are steps that we absolutely need to take, and we need to take them this year. And you, Chair, articulated many of them, and I agreed with much of what you said. That, and I will add on to them some of the tax policy topics that I think we've had some discussions about. We need to move forward with that. I am very sensitive to people who are struggling to pay their property taxes, but I'm still not convinced that making this monumental change in the timeline that we have set for it is going to actually do that, and it may do more harm. And I'm worrying more and more about the harm. So that's sort of no different than what I've been saying all along.
So you've mentioned the timeline a couple of times. And I've heard that repeatedly. I think the timeline in there's no doubt it's ambitious. But I think it's worth thinking about, I mean, how much, if we were to say, okay, we're going to extend everything by another 2 years, would that really make a difference in how you feel about anything?
No, I wouldn't say that. I said the timeline for what we have in place feels not doable. Okay. But I also think that given more time, we might make adjustments to this law that Vermonters will get behind. And right now I'm feeling they're not. And I'm feeling that pushing them into things that I can't tell them what the outcome will be, giving more time to this process will allow us to make those decisions that we were talking about at the end of the table here in witness testimony this morning from JFO and Ledge Council. Those are major decisions we need to make, and I want to make sure we're doing them thoughtfully and that we have Vermonters' voice as a part of that decision. And that's where the timeline, to me, it doesn't allow for that. So,
all right, so the question becomes, where do we go from here? I don't think we're going to solve that between now and the floor, but we do have some extra time. I think that Representative Taylor is going to have some discussion points for us tomorrow that we can look at. And, you know, I'll think as sort of the chair of the committee about how, you know, at a certain point, we're going to just have to say how many people can get on board with this concept or that concept in order to get something out of the committee. And then for some, you know, and then when we put a package together, how much of that is too little for some of us and how much it might be too much. But I think, you know, I really appreciate everybody's comments just in terms of being, I think, thoughtful with the sort of right goals at hand. And, you know, it's, you know, listening to Kate say she agrees with something I said, and something consistent at the same time, really kind of shows how.
Made my day.
It just really shows that there's a lot here to like and there's a lot here to be cautious about. And, you know, people say, well, what is the goal of Act 73? You know, is it equity? Is it property taxes? Is it better accountability? Is it more opportunity? Is it reducing property taxes? You're controlling the growth of property taxes. You know, and the thing is that it's, for some people, it might be a few of those things. For others, it's all of those things. And, you know, I will say that some days for me, the equity portion is a little more important. For other days, it's the, you know, sort of ability to control costs in the future part. So, you know, it's big and overwhelming and trying to do a lot of things at once. I think it's got, you know, it's got its toe in every area of concern and opportunity. But it's big and it does require a lot of everybody. You know, just the sort of the, you know, as we talk about timeline, for example, you know, just the ability to sort of, if we were to say whatever map Chris puts on the table is the best, and we're going to vote it out this week. That, you know, there's still big questions about voting and representation, and can you leave it to districts to come up with it as we did with Act 46, or is it too big given the size? Yeah.
Another question about too big is, again, this idea of inconsistency across the state. And again, everything's a trade-off.
Yeah.
But do you want policy consistency in how school boards operate and vote across the state or not? You know, how much flexibility in things and how much consistency in things in our education system that we're reimagining do we want to have?
You know, in the map and policy that I put on the table, that was kind of my goal, except with board representation, because I didn't dare go that far. But is to say, you know, that we would have sort of uniform governance, all operating under statute instead of varied articles of agreement and all of that, was sort of build on that consistency. And you know, I think that one of the areas that the Agency of Education is trying to do a better job on than we have had in a long time is accountability in our schools. Like they would say that 119 districts makes accountability really hard. Or 53 superintendencies. You know, so I'm sympathetic to that also as a benefit of that, because I think we have had uneven accountability across the state. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, but again, it's more to just have to have a consistent set of statutes that govern our education system.
In different parts of Vermont are different. So having how much flexibility does there need? Because one size doesn't fit all.
Well,
So is there a balance point for that?
So if I can just add on to what you just said, there's a reason partly why it doesn't work. When we don't have a statewide e-finance system that we have been trying to do for as long as I've been here and a lot longer than that. And that makes no sense to me that we still don't have a statewide one that everybody's part of.
the problem is we tried and failed.
That is full information Well, right, but even that was years ago. And the school student information system is also not, and I mean, if those things can't even be done at the agency, that they would have helped a lot for accountability. They really would have, because we would have been comparing apples to apples. It's really hard not to do that. And that's a source of deep frustration for me because I've been dealing with it for so long.
Is the Senate doing anything that you're aware of that would be of value?
You know, I've looked at their agenda. I think that, you know, I think they have concepts on the table, but you know, they're waiting for us. We've got the extension. You know, I think if we could somehow coalesce around concepts in the next couple of days, we could turn toward more sort of joint work so that we're working in parallel. But I don't think we're there yet. You else want to say anything? Want me to just make you all sit here in silence for 5 minutes?
I have kids, we're good.
The miscellaneous ed fill outs tomorrow?
Yeah, so we can.
That would be something productive we could do.
So it's on the agenda again, miscellaneous ed bill. I think one of the sort of sticking points we had within this committee was the therapeutic school, one buys another. And I just want to remind us how we got here. I think that it was believed by the one entity buying the other entity that it would not constitute a new school. A state board of education with legal counsel said, no, this does constitute a new school because it's a new LLC.
There's a moratorium.
And so therefore there's a moratorium, it violates the moratorium. So, you know, we just need to decide whether we want to clarify that it doesn't apply to one entity buying another existing entity. And so we can talk about it further tomorrow. It's not really listed on the agenda right now, but I think that's the only thing in the miscellaneous ed bill we were a little wary of.
Is that a separate?
I got a separate bill.
Sorry.
It's too big. It was, but then we moved it because it was just too big.
And so then, yeah, the chronic absenteeism, as I said before we went on, is just trying to get that part sorted. I think otherwise we have plenty of consensus on it. And, you know, frankly, if all of a sudden somebody discovers something they don't like, it's got to go through the Senate process anyway.
Remind me if were you putting language in on the, it was the background checks?
Yes, so that's another, I think, solvable thing. So the AOE wanted the ability to do criminal background checks on their own employees. Then we had a request to also have it done for contractors with the AOE who might be engaged with students. That language was added.
Does that include early childhood? Because they're having a lot of problems getting fingerprinted and getting people hired.
Yes, so
Would AOE do all of that?
no, this is AOE, this is AOE wanting to do criminal background checks on their own employees. That may be student facing. Yeah, and contractors. So like years ago, they hired a photographer who they should have done a better job doing their background check. And so there's been some emails back and forth on this issue. The issue that Rep. McCann brings up is one that has existed since the dawn of time and for some reason cannot be solved. I have no idea why. I've never understood that something so uncomplicated is so bloody complicated. And that's through numerous secretaries of education and people at AHS. Anyway, so things going back and forth, and it came down to a shall versus a may, which is being looked at right now. So the contractor part was not requested by the AOE, but by others. It seemed like a reasonable request. The original language that we had in there proposed that shall do background checks on everybody. They are suggesting just make it a may, because what the AOE's intent here is to be able to do background checks on their own employees and their own contractors, which they're fine with, who will be involved with students. Right now, it's actually not required. Great. So anyway, Beth's doing a little work on that, get that up, and that's the last thing there. And then chronic absenteeism is just, what do you do? How do you prosecute something where you don't list any sort of punishment? And that's hopefully being worked out elsewhere. Again, this was an AOE initiative, AOE language. I'd like to hope that they can solve it without us having to sort of make a policy choice here. Because it's still's not going to cure chronic absenteeism overnight. So if it doesn't make it over the finish line, that's okay. Or if we do miscellaneous ed bill, it can flop back and forth. We can add it later.
Changing the direction on how we're handling chronic absenteeism, I think is really important. And I like much of what I heard in this bill and, you know, working with families and students as opposed to not, you know, is absolutely critical, I think, to the success of our kids and our families as well.
Yeah, I think it would be a missed opportunity if it goes away.
That was my,
I think it's something good we could get done this session, like the cell phone bill last time.
Yeah. Yeah, although that was added on by the Senate.
Still, the work we did on that was good.
Yes, we did.
We agreed.
we could all.
No, we didn't.
Pretty much.
Well,
That's right.
I was gonna qualify that before you jumped in, but you beat me to the punch.
You agree now. I know, I just was.
All right. Nothing further on the item that's on our agenda. I'm gonna call us in recess and we'll be back here in the morning.
9:15 tomorrow, right? I'm traveling in.
Yes.
15.